senses, which are a nuisance, including the body itself. It is also liberated from the will, the doer inside, which always bosses us around, make us go this way, make us go that way, and we become completely peaceful. When we talk about the freed mind, again, we're definitely talking about the samadhi, the jhana states. That's definitely what it means in this particular case. And afterwards, I will show you a comparison between these satipatthana on the one hand and anapanasati on the other hand, and show you how it kind of, one thing, how they work in parallel with each other, and the same kind of vocabulary, the same kind of words are found in both of these suttas. It shows that there is a consistency between satipatthana on the one hand and anapanasati on the other hand. So it's very, everything holds together very beautifully. Everything is very coherent. Everything pointing in the same direction towards the same kind of experiences. And this, I think, is very reassuring. It makes you feel that we know what we are dealing with, something that actually is the expression of some spiritual genius who put these things together in this way. So this is the contemplation of mind. It's going deeper and deeper, and in a large part, the contemplation of mind is in large part equivalent to what we would call seeing the nimittas in the meditation experiences, seeing the bright lights and these kind of things. It is basically about that. Okay, let's move on now. So then you meditate as before. You do this internally, externally, both yourself and also other people by inference, internally and externally. You meditate observing the mind as liable, not the mind, but the mind states as liable to originate, to vanish, and then originate and vanish. Or mindfulness is established that the mind exists to the extent necessary for knowledge and mindfulness. That meditate independent, not grasping at anything in the world. That is how a mendicant meditates, by observing an aspect of the mind. So that is the third of the four satipatthanas. Now we come to the last one, which is the Dhammanupassana. And Dhammanupassana is, again, very interesting. And one of the things that you will see on the Dhammanupassana is that it varies quite a lot between the various early schools and the various sources that we have for understanding it. And because of that, we need to find the common core again. So let's again do a comparative study, a comparison of the various sources. So what we do know is that in the Pali, there are 5 aspects to Dhammanupassana. There's 5 ways to do this contemplation. One is to observe the 5 hindrances. The second one is to observe the 5 aggregates. The third one is to observe the 7 factors of awakening. The fourth one is the sense spaces, the 6 senses. And the last one is the 4 noble truths. So these are the 5 ways of doing Dhammanupassana. So let's see how that compares the Pali with all the other early sources and early schools. So here it comes. So you have all the various schools, and then on the left there you have the 5 aggregates. Okay, you have the 6 sense spheres before the 7 factors of awakening. I got that in the wrong order, but anyway, there you are. And then you have the 4 noble truths at the bottom. And when you look at that, remember again in the middle there, the one which has all this column here in the middle, that is the Prajnaparamita Sutra and Mahayana Sutra. So leave that out. That doesn't matter so much. Again, it is very different from the other ones. But if you disregard that one in the middle there, you can see that the 5 hindrances are found in all the sources, everywhere. This must be an early and original way of practicing Dhammanupassana. And it makes good sense. Remember that what we are dealing with here, we're dealing with Satipatthana. The main purpose of Satipatthana is to lead to Samadhi. This is what you find again and again in the suttas. Noble Eightfold Path, Samma Sati, leading to Samma Samadhi. the 5 spiritual faculties, the spiritual faculty of sati, mindfulness, leading to the spiritual faculty of samadhi. The 7 factors of awakening, the factor of awakening of sati, mindfulness, leading stage by stage to the spiritual factor, the factor of awakening, which is samadhi, stage by stage. This is throughout the suttas. It's a core idea in the suttas. So we should expect to find the 7 factors, 5 hindrances here as the Dhammanupassana. Then if we go down to the 4th one, the 7 factors of awakening down here, you can see again, all the various early sources have the 7 factors of awakening. The only exception again is the Prajna Paramita Sutra, which is a Mahayana sutra, and we should not really expect to find it there. Again, it makes sense because these are the qualities that lead to samadhi, starting off with sati sambojjhanga, the mindfulness factor of awakening, and then you have the dhammavicaya sambojjhanga, stage by stage, leading to the samadhi sambojjhanga, the samadhi factor of awakening. And of course, the last one is the upekkha sambojjhanga, the equanimity factor of awakening here. So that makes perfect sense. But then let's look at the other ones. Look at the 5 aggregates, the 5 khandas, which is the second one from the top. And you will see that the Pali is the only version that has the 5 aggregates. It is missing from all the other early sources. And that's kind of very fascinating, isn't it? And this is almost absolutely certain that the 5 aggregates do not belong to this particular contemplation. And this again goes to show that the main purpose of Satipatthana is not to gain insight. Once you start looking at the 5 aggregates, you're looking at wisdom and insight, understanding the nature of reality. That always comes after samadhi. But the main purpose of Satipatthana is to get you to samadhi. So the 5 aggregates don't really belong in this part. Then you look at the 4 Noble Truths at the very bottom. And the 4 Noble Truths are only found in the Pali. The Pali is on the left-hand side. You can't really see it because it's kind of hidden there. So my apologies for that, but it's very hard to get this exactly right. I can't do it. So just don't worry about it. So Pali is on the left-hand side, the green one, and on the right-hand side, you have the other green one for the 4 Noble Truths, down here. And that is the Dharmaguptaka Abhidhamma. The rest of them, it is not found. So again, this too is very likely to be late. And in a sense, that makes sense because the 4 Noble Truths are all about insight. In fact, the 4 Noble Truths are really all about becoming a stream entry. That is really what it comes down to, the idea of stream entry. So it doesn't really belong here. It belongs after samadhi, after you had success in your meditation. And the last one here is the 6 sense spheres. And you will see it is missing in 3 sources. One of them is the Mahayana text. Don't worry too much about that one, but is missing in the Ekayana Sutra, which is from the Mahasangikas, and is missing from the Vibhanga, which is the Pali Abhidhamma. So this one, there's a little bit more evidence that it is more early, but still it does not look like it is part of the very earliest tradition. It looks like actually in the very earliest tradition there was only 2 things in the Dhammanupassana, 5 hindrances and 7 factors of awakening here. And if you understand how the whole path works, that Satipatthana leads to samadhi, actually this makes very, very good sense. The inside parts are kind of left out. So how then is this done? How do we do this kind of contemplation of these things? This is what comes up next. Because if we are dealing with the 5 hindrances, you may think that, well, we have been dealing with hindrances all along. We just had a look at the Chittanupassana, contemplation of mind. That is all about hindrances and defilements of the mind. We were looking at the worldly happiness and suffering. Well, that also is about defilements, probably. So why do we have to deal with defilements again? What is the point of that? And what you will see when we go through this is that in this context, it is all about causality. Why do these hindrances come up? And by understanding the causes of things, we can eliminate the causes, then we can eliminate the problem. And this is very likely to be one of the reasons why this is called Dhamma contemplation. Dhamma here referring to the causality that we are seeing between various factors. This is why Bhante Sujato translates Dhamma here as principles. Yeah, the principles of causality is really what the idea here is. We understand cause and effect. Why am I feeling so much ill will? What does this ill will come from? What am I doing wrong? Am I looking at the world in the wrong way? Yeah, probably. Okay, so what do I need to do? So let's have a look at this. Okay, so the 5 hindrances. How does a mendicant or anyone meditate observing an aspect of principles or Dhamma? Yeah, these are the 5 hindrances. It's when a mendicant meditates by observing an aspect or principle with respect to the 5 hindrances. In other words, you're observing the 5 hindrances. That's really what it means. How does a mendicant meditate observing an aspect of the 5 hindrances? It is when a mendicant who has sensual desire in them understands, I have sensual desire in me. When they don't have sensual desire in them, they understand, I don't have sensual desire in me. They understand how sensual desire arises, how, when it has arisen, it's given up, and how, once it's given up, it does not re-arise again in the future. Yeah, so you can see here it's very detailed. It's a detailed understanding of the nature of mind. This is really what this is about. Yeah. So first of all, I understand there is sensory desire in me. So sensual desire, I don't know if it is an ideal translation, because what this really refers to is also very refined aspects of desire. Yeah, maybe sensory desire is better than sensual desire related to the 5 senses. But the first point here is to understand the general idea that we even have these things. And the point of that is that very often these things can be very refined, as I mentioned before. It can mean just a little bit of attachment to the body, a little bit of attachment to the idea of being able to see or to hear. Yeah, this can be enough to stop you from entering into samadhi. And this is where this idea of sensual desire becomes very refined. If you are attached to the idea of being able to see, you cannot give up seeing. If you are attached to the idea of being able to hear, you cannot give up hearing. Yeah. So if you say that, if someone says, "Oh, I'm going to make you blind," what do you say? Do you say, "Oh yeah, sure, why not? Who cares about seeing?" Or do you say, "No, thank you. Actually, I would like to see." Which one do you say? Are you attached to the ability to see? And the answer is probably yes. Most people are attached to being able to see. It's just natural that most people are attached to that. But to enter a state of samadhi, you have to give up seeing completely. You are giving up that world. This is what it means to give up the sensual world or the sensory world. It's as if you are accepting blindness. It is as if someone comes along the street and they say, "I'm going to pluck out your eyes. Can I please have your eyes?" And you say, "Okay, I'll take my eye out." And you take your eye out and you give them the eye. "Here you are, you can have my eye." There's a famous story about that. That's why I'm saying it, It's not just kind of my idea. But basically, you are willing to give up the 5 senses completely, because when you enter a jhana state, there is no access to those 5 senses. Yeah, this is how profound it is. So any attachment you have to the 5 senses will stop you from being able to enter a deep state of samadhi. So you can see here why it is important to contemplate the downside of the 5 senses, why they are not really important, why you can live much more happily without them. let me take the story anyway. I just said very briefly the story about plucking out the eye and giving it to someone. And this is a story, you probably heard it before. And this is the story of Uppalavanna. She was a very famous bhikkhuni at the time of the Buddha. And she was very beautiful, apparently, but she was also very skilled in psychic powers. She was the Buddha's #1 female disciple, non-disciple in psychic powers. But because she was so beautiful, there was this man who fell in love with her. Yeah, so he goes to her, and she realized that there's a problem here. This man has an interest in me, and it's not the right kind of interest. It's not just Dhamma that he is interested in. There's other things as well. And so this man, he looks as this nun, and you are so beautiful. Your eyes are so beautiful diamonds, or beautiful eyes that you have. And then she takes, very famous story, she takes hold of her eye, pulls out her eye, and gives it to him. And you can imagine that he was horrified. Yeah, I don't want your eye. That's not what I'm here for. So of course, then he understands, well, there's something about this nun that is really special. So he kind of runs away, and and then she's okay. And because of the power of her meditation or whatever, they say that the eye was restored later on, or maybe she just took it out and put it back in again. I don't know exactly what happened. But that is the story. Yeah, she is no longer attached to the idea of seeing. It doesn't matter for her. She just wants this fellow to go away, so you can have my eyes if you want to. And that is almost the kind of non-attachment that you have to have in this case if you want to enter deep samadhi. You have to be willing to give up the world of sight. So you can see how even very small attachments can make this very hard. Yeah. So sensual desire or sensual attachment is within you. When you are without these things. In other words, you had a jhana experience in the past, you know what it means not to have these things. So you understand your mind very well. Then you understand how sensual desire arises. Yeah, this is obviously very important. How does sensual desire arise? And the way that it arises, it is talked about in other suttas, is because you are looking for the beautiful in things. When you look for the beautiful in something, then desire for that thing arises as a consequence. So you need to learn not to see the beautiful. And that is why we do things like asubha practice. The asubha is looking at the 31 parts of the body, because the asubha is literally challenging the idea of beauty in the body. We neutralize the idea of beauty by looking for the negative aspects of the body. And we can do that with the whole world. We can do the sabbaloka anabhiratta sanya, which is the non-delight in the whole world, understanding how the whole world of the five senses ultimately is not really satisfactory. It is not worthy of having desire for that world. Instead, I'm going to have desire for the jhanas, for the samadhi, for the deep meditation, because only that is really conducive to real happiness. We're looking at the first of the five hindrances, and I have said a little bit about how sensual desire arises. It arises because we are looking for the beautiful in something, and when we see the beautiful, then desire for that object naturally arises as a consequence. How, when it has arisen, is it given up? So how, if you have a sensual desire, how it is given up? It is given up by no longer focusing on the beautiful in that object, yeah? By reminding yourself that actually it is not as beautiful as I think. Remembering the downside of these things, the adinava of what you're looking at. And as you remember the downside and you don't focus on the beauty, then the desire disappears as a consequence. Yeah, this is how it goes. And how, once it's given up, it doesn't arise again in the future. Well, there's different ways how that happens. One of the ways is that you practice samadhi, so you go beyond sensual desires and you keep on practicing samadhi enough. It is also done simply by being more mindful, being aware, so it doesn't happen again in the future, by reminding yourself of the downside. And ultimately, it is done by insight, by further insight into the object, to the point whereby all desire for those things actually is gone completely. There's different ways on how to avoid the arising in the future. But basically, it means developing the mind further in that direction, reminding yourself of the downside of the objects. So this is how you understand sensual desire. Yeah, you can see it is quite a large kind of contemplation, involves many aspects. And one of the main aspects that it involves is causality. You understand how it arises. You understand how, when it's arisen, it is given up. That's also about causality. Yeah, removing the cause, the effect is given up. And then finally, how it never arises again in future is when you destroy the cause completely. When the cause is no longer there, you're no longer capable of seeing the beauty in this object, because you know, actually, it is empty. There's nothing there of any real interest. Let's go on to the second of the 5 hindrances. When they have ill will in them, they understand I have ill will in me. When they don't have ill will in them, they understand I don't have ill will in me. They understand how ill will arises, how when it's already arisen, it is given up, and how once it's given up, it doesn't arise again in the future. So you understand all the aspects of ill will, even subtle degrees of irritation, maybe slight darkness in the mind, things that don't even seem like ill will, but you haven't embraced the other person fully. You haven't got full loving kindness yet. Well, if you haven't got full loving kindness, there may be a little bit of ill will still in the mind somewhere. Yeah, so you understand the whole aspect of ill will. You understand when it is given up. Yeah, in other words, you know what the mind completely without this is like. And one of the signs that you have no ill will is that it's easy to practice loving kindness, yeah, because you embrace other people. You see their good qualities. You don't have any negative views of anyone else. So it's a very profound thing. Not to have any ill will at all is actually very profound. They understand how ill will arises. And the way they arises, it says in the suttas, is you focus on the patiga nimitta. Patiga means resistance, the mark of resistance or the aspect of resistance. In other words, there is something in other people that you resist. Yeah, you don't really want to see it. It's like a negative quality in the other person. You resist that. You don't actually want to see it. And as you focus on that thing that you resist, actually that is where ill will can arise, because really you don't like it at all. And then you get upset about it as a consequence. So the next one then is how, when it's already arisen, it is given up. And that is no longer to resist those qualities. Yeah, it means that yes, you see the negative quality in another person, but you live with it. You know that this is what people are like. You don't resist it. You just know it is there, and you kind of you have compassion usually instead. You have compassion for the other person because you know they have a problem. And when you know someone has a problem, well, then you tend to feel kindness towards them instead. This is how you turn ill will around to compassion. Yeah. So you look at them with compassionate eyes because actually they have aspects of the personality that other people resist and don't like. And finally, once it is given up, once it is given up, it doesn't arise again in the future. You kind of completely undermine this idea of looking at things that you resist. You have compassion all the time. You see people, you always have compassion. You never resist their qualities. You understand that they are the ones who have a problem, not you. When you resist it, it's because you think you have the problem. But actually, it's the other person who have a problem. All you have to do is have compassion, and then the problem is kind of resolved by itself. So these are the first 2 hindrances, and these first 2 hindrances are by far the most important of the 5 hindrances. The rest of the hindrances largely arise out of the first 2 ones. You could say that the most important of all the hindrances is actually the first one of sensual desire, because ill will also arises very often because of sensual desire. So that is like the root. So ultimately we have to understand sensual desire. But for practical purposes, I would say the most important one is the ill will. It's very hard to deal with sensual desire. Ill will is much easier to deal with because it's easy to see that it is unpleasant. It's easy to see how it leads to all kind of bad consequences, yeah? And it's relatively easy to change your outlook to have compassion for other people instead of having anger and ill will for them. So the whole thing with ill will is more easy to deal with. So that's why I think that is really where we should start. And then once that is kind of, you have dealt with that, you don't feel so much anger anymore, then you can deal more with sensual desire as a consequence, as a next step, I should say. So let's have a look at the last hindrances very briefly. So when you have dullness and drowsiness in you, you know I have dullness and drowsiness in me. When you don't have dullness and drowsiness in you, you know I don't have dullness and drowsiness in me. They understand how dullness and drowsiness arise, how when they have already arisen, they are given up, and how once they are given up, they don't arise again in the future. So this is dullness and drowsiness is a problem that many people have in the meditation, yeah, a very, very common thing. But remember, it can also be incredibly subtle. So for example, when you're meditating, if your mind is not 100% bright, it often means there is a little bit of dullness and drowsiness left behind, yeah, very subtle amount of dullness and drowsiness. So really, it is only when the mind is super bright and super clear and super sharp, that is when there is none of these whatsoever. You want to understand these things fully. Only when you understand them fully can you overcome them, and can you then go to samadhi as a consequence. Then when you have a state of samadhi, you know that you don't have dullness and drowsiness. For the first time in your life, are you able to understand this fully? What it means to have a mind that is completely clear, completely sharp, and there is no kind of clouds or grayness or any of this inside. Yeah. So again, understanding these things fully is actually quite demanding. Yeah? Then you have to understand the causality. How does it arise? And this is where it starts to get quite interesting. How does dullness and drowsiness actually arise? And one of the main reasons why it arises is because of the first two hindrances. Yeah, because the mind, you are interested in the sensual objects of the world, the sensory things of the world. The mind is tired by that pursuit of the sensory things, because that pursuit is a kind of it's restless. Yeah, it tires the mind out. It makes the mind less sharp, because these are dull experiences almost by their definition. Yeah, they're not really sharp experience, the experience of the objects of the world. So you dull the mind, it becomes drowsy by experiencing too much sensual pleasures in the world. Ill will is even worse. Yeah, if you have a lot of ill will, afterwards you often feel dull and drowsy as a consequence. So both of these first two defilements are root causes why we have dullness and drowsiness. So if you want to overcome these things, the best thing very often is to look at the first two hindrances. How can I let go of those two a little bit more? You can also overcome this by just practicing well, by being kind, by being generous, because being kind and generous actually counteracts dullness and drowsiness, because it makes you feel happy. It makes you feel bright when you live well. Yeah. So this is kind of also a way of undermining the drowsiness and letting go of some of the problem by actually just living with kindness. But as you go deeper and deeper in your meditation, then dullness and drowsiness can still kind of hang around, yeah, and it can stay around for until very deep aspects of meditation. And sometimes you just have to investigate why you are using your mind wrongly. Maybe you are using too much willpower. That can lead to dullness and drowsiness. There's too much restlessness there, which drains the energy, leads to dullness and drowsiness. So there's many things there that can actually reduce the energy of the mind. So you overcome that. And then when you overcome that, then of course you go deeper. So you understand the causes, you understand when it has arisen, you give it up by giving up the cause, and once they have been given up, how they don't re-arise again in the future, yeah? By giving up all of these hindrances together, eventually the root cause of these things is eliminated. Let's go to the fourth of the hindrances. When they have restlessness and remorse in them, they understand, I have restlessness and remorse in me. When they don't have restlessness and remorse in them, they understand, I don't have restlessness and remorse in me. They understand how restless and remorse arise, how once they have arisen, they are given up, and how once they have given up, they don't arise again in the future. So restlessness and remorse, restlessness is just the movement of the mind, the mind not being still, but always moving. It is a bit similar to agitation. Agitation is a bit more unpleasant because it's like a deeper kind of restlessness. But restlessness is any kind of movement. And it's only when the mind becomes perfectly still in samadhi that all restlessness is given up. There is no movement at all anymore of the mind. That is the end of all restlessness. Where does restlessness come from? Usually comes from desire. Desire moves the mind. There is the first hindrance again, desire for the sensory objects of the world. This is the main reason why we have restlessness in the mind. Ill will is the same. If you have ill will, it makes the mind move because you think about the object and the mind moves as a consequence. So deal with the first two hindrances, overcomes not only dullness and drowsiness, but also restlessness. And then there is remorse. This is kukucha, and kukucha is usually the consequence of living badly, not doing the right thing, having maybe broken some precepts, and then you feel remorse afterwards, you feel bad about yourself. And that is also like a dullness or restlessness in the mind, where the mind moves. The mind doesn't want to be still because you feel maybe a little bit guilty or a little bit shame or whatever it is that you have done what you have. And so the mind does not become peaceful as a consequence. So you understand these feelings again to the very refined level. You understand how when you do something bad, you can experience that badness in your mind as a dullness in the mind, as a restlessness in the mind. This is how you experience your bad qualities. It's kind of amazing how you can see in your mind directly the result of your bad actions. So you see this fully, and you know the mind when these things are absent. You know that through your samadhi experiences, you have a full understanding of these things down to the last very refined aspects. And then you understand again how they arise, how they arise through the wrong attention to things that kind of drive you forward. It can be related to sensual pleasures, as I mentioned before, they make you restless, but it can also have to do with the sense of I am. That's another very powerful defilement in us. You want to be somebody, and sometimes they talk about the meditation, and meditation becomes profound. You think about your family, you think about your career, you think about your reputation, you think about your country. And this is the sense of I inside of us that wants to think about these things because the I wants to express itself. The me, I want to express myself. This is another source of restlessness. So giving up the sense of ego, giving up the sense of I to a very large extent, not having such a strong sense of who you are as a person, not caring so much about which country you're from or what family you're from and all of these kind of things, but just being your own independent person, not caring about what you look like or what you dress like and all of these kind of things, that reduces restlessness. So the I, the sense of me, also produces restlessness. So when all of these things are given up, restlessness goes down. And then finally, the full ending of restlessness, it doesn't arise in the future. Well, really, it only happens when you become an arahant, because the I drives the restlessness. It means that the anagami, the non-returner, still has a little bit of I inside of them. I still exist. a little bit when you are a non-returner. So actually, it only disappears fully once you become an arahant. So it's like a long, long way down the track before the restlessness is completely gone. But of course, you can give up a lot of these problems a long time before you become an arahant. But a tiny, tiny remnant will go with you all the way to the end of the path. Let's look at the very last of the 5 hindrances. So, this is how it reads. When they have doubt in them, they understand, I have doubt in me. When they don't have doubt in them, they understand, I don't have doubt in me. They understand how doubt arises, how, when it's already arisen, it's given up, and how, once it's given up, it does not arise again in the future. The same kind of expression all the way through. Yeah, so you know that you have doubt. Yeah, what does it mean to have doubt on the Buddhist path? And on the Buddhist path, the Pali word is vicikicca. It has a very specific meaning. It does not mean doubt in any kind of context or any kind of way. It's a very specific kind of doubt. It's a doubt about what is good and what is bad. Yeah, you don't fully know what are the good qualities and what are the bad qualities, what are the good teachings and what are the bad teachings. That is really the kind of doubt that we are talking about here. So if you are meditating well, you're becoming peaceful, things are kind of calming down, and then that you are blocked, it doesn't go any further, you have doubt about what is it that blocks me? What is it in this experience that is not perfect? Yeah, what is the problem in this particular experience? And when you start to understand the problem in your experience, why it is problematic, then you overcome that doubt by investigating your experience. Now you see where the problem arises, and then you go beyond the doubt as a consequence. So having doubt means that you don't really understand properly. You don't know how to go from here to the jhanas. What is blocking me from attaining a jhana state? What is blocking me from attaining a samadhi state? That is what you don't understand. That is where the doubt exists. Yeah, the doubt about wholesome qualities. And this doubt also extends to doubts about the teachings, the Dhamma. You don't know what the wholesome teachings are, the good teachings. You cannot separate the good and the bad teachings because that is very closely related to the doubt about wholesome qualities. Yeah, it's a very similar kind of thing. Once you become, you attain a full state of samadhi, you understand what are the good teachings in the world. You have an insight into that. So even teachings, you then kind of know much better because you understand which teachings lead to samadhi and which don't. So you know when you have doubt, okay, now I don't really understand what is going on in terms of qualities. And you know when you are free of doubt, when you don't have any doubt, yeah? Because your mind is gone to a samadhi state. When you have samadhi, doubt is completely gone. You know exactly the meaning of purity. You understand how doubt arises. And doubt arises by giving wrong attention to what is going on. Yeah, you are attending it in the wrong way. You are not able to see clearly what is happening here. You don't see your attachments. You don't see the underlying sensual desire that is there. You don't really know how to attend to the situation. That wrong kind of attention, the ayoniso manasikara, is really the problem there. So how then, once it has arisen, you give it up is by giving yoniso manasikara, by investigating it carefully. And when you investigate the state carefully, then doubt comes to an end because you understand what is happening here. And ultimately, by practicing like this again and again, ultimately doubt is completely gone. When doubt is completely gone, the 5 hindrances are gone. Yeah, when you become a stream enterer, then you have no doubt anymore because you know the Dhamma, you know the teachings, you know what is wholesome. So a stream enterer destroys doubt once and for all. This is why the stream mentor doesn't have any doubt, because they know what the teachings are about. So, let us just finish off the 5 hindrances. So, let's see. So then it says, and so then meditate, observing an aspect of principles internally, externally, and both internally and externally. So you know that these 5 hindrances, how they are in you, that's how you start out, always focusing on oneself first of all. Then you know by inference that what is inside of you must also be true for other people. And then both, it is true for both me and others. It is a universal truth that these hindrances are there. Maybe I should say a little bit more about this idea of internal, external, and universal truth, because one of the problems might be that, well, maybe you think that if I get reborn in a different realm, if I become a deva, then I will be free of these problems. I won't have any suffering anymore. Everything will kind of be gone. I don't have to worry about these kind of feelings or these kind of mind states or whatever. So the idea here is to remember that these are universal truths that are applicable to all beings. You cannot actually get reborn out of these problems. Actually, you can get reborn out of the 5 hindrances for a short time by kind of being reborn as a Brahma, but eventually you have to come back to the human realm again, or to some kind of lower realm. You cannot use rebirth as a way of ending these things. And this is the idea of contemplating both internally and externally, to understand that these are universal principles that really apply across the board. And so the only way to get out of it, to end it, is not through rebirth, but it is by eliminating it through insight and practicing the path. And this is true for all of these things that we have been looking at, internal, external, the mind states, the body, and all of these kind of things. So this is kind of the idea behind this, having a universal insight into these things. Then you have the meditation on observing the liability to originate, to vanish, and both originate and vanish. And you can see that this here is a little bit strange, because we have already been talking about how things arise and how they are given up. And now it is like we're saying it again. Originate just means arise, vanish just means giving up. And so here you can see what I was saying before, that this sentence in the middle here, origination and vanishing, is quite possibly a later addition, because it doesn't fit very well. This idea of originating and vanishing is already talked about in the main part of the text. So it's like it duplicates something, and that seems a bit strange. So another little clue to the things I was talking about before, that this is probably not part of the original text. The main clue to understanding that is to look at all the sources and compare them. Then you can see that there's only a few sources have this, but this is another clue which points in the same direction. The same kind of idea is valid also here. Then you have, or mindfulness is established, that principles exist, these dhammas exist, the causality exists to the extent necessary for knowledge and mindfulness. They meditate independent, not grasping at anything in the world. So this idea that you meditate independent, this is anisito. This is an important principle, because if you are going to have success with gaining deep samadhi, or to have deep insight, you cannot hold on to anything. If you are dependent on something, it means that you still have an attachment. And when there is that attachment, it is impossible for you to see it as it actually is. First of all, you have to let it go, then you can see it properly. So independence is really a requirement to be able to gain the full insight into this phenomena. So you meditate independent, not grasping at anything in the world. You don't grasp, and when you don't grasp, that allows you to get the deep insight, which makes that non-grasping final. It comes to the final non-grasping. There is no more grasping at anything at all. That is how a mendicant meditates by observing an aspect of principles or dhammas or causality with regard to the 5 hindrances. So there you are, very interesting section and very profound and very detailed. Yeah, this is one of the most detailed explanations of the 5 hindrances you find anywhere. There's a lot of food for thought there and for really learning how to deal with the mind, yeah, how to deal with meditation practice. A lot of very useful ideas of how to look for the hindrances and look for the problems so you can overcome that and take the path all the way to the end. Get the full samadhi, and when you have the full samadhi, of course, then insight also becomes possible as a consequence.